Hey folks. Approximately 100 years before the events of Twilight Princess, the Gerudo tribe were a thriving group of female warriors hailing from the desert, known for their noble thievery and agile combat abilities, with their leader and one lone male of the tribe, Ganondorf, wreaking havoc and betrayal across Hyrule. Jump ahead around a century, and the events of the best game in the series take place. An adventure that takes Link through transformation and shadow, but also to the far reaches of the scorching hot Gerudo Desert. Only the Gerudo aren't out here anymore. It's a rugged and abandoned plain, only home to some Bulblins who have set up camps out here. It's not explained in the game where the Gerudo people went or what might have happened to them. Ganondorf, the Gerudo King of Thieves, does appear in the game, acting as the final boss after managing to escape from the Twilight Realm. But his people are nowhere to be seen nor mentioned throughout the story. There's a brief hint in the Hyrule Encyclopedia book, but it just doesn't add up if you ask me. So what happened to the Gerudo warriors of only a century ago? Why does the desert still hold the name if the people aren't here? Well, I believe there may be a dark truth that's been kept hidden behind that question. And in today's video, we're going to dive into my theory on the miserable fate of the Gerudo in Twilight Princess. Be sure to go and grab yourself a delicious snack and drink for the video, folks. Subscribe if you're new, drop a cheeky wee like down below, and let's get into this one. To begin this theory, we must begin by looking at the backstory of the Gerudo going into Twilight Princess. These games take place in the child timeline split following the events of Ocarina of Time. As mentioned, during the time frame of Ocarina of Time, around a century before the events of Twilight Princess, the Gerudo tribe were an established group of warriors and noble thieves, living out in the desert to the west. Whilst under the leadership of Ganondorf, known as the King of Evil, not all Gerudo themselves were inherently evil. Rather, most just followed their king out of fear, brainwash, or pressure. Granted, some may have been quite evil, and most if not all were thieves, the majority weren't evil to the extent Ganondorf is. The Gerudo King is evil at heart. This is something seen in other entries of the series as well, such as Hyrule Warriors: Age of Imprisonment. We see in that game how the Gerudo warriors follow Ganondorf to a point, but in that installment, many of them turn on their king, refusing to follow his actions that are fueled purely by his own malice and greed. During this time frame, Ganondorf takes over Hyrule by swearing a false allegiance to the King of Hyrule, gaining his trust and getting closer than he ever should have been allowed to. This gave him the ability to monitor Link, and eventually sabotage the hero's quest by sneaking into the Sacred Realm, after Link draws the Blade of Evil's Bane. Later on in the story, after Link jumps ahead 7 years and conquers the remaining dungeons and bosses, he comes face to face against Ganondorf, battling it out atop his Dark Tower, formerly Hyrule Castle. He then has to fight the Gerudo King's true form, Ganon, and the hero successfully slays the beast. With Hyrule saved, Princess Zelda then decides to send Link back in time to not only recover his lost childhood, but also to warn the royal family of Hyrule about Ganondorf's ill intentions to take over. This is what leads to Ganondorf's backstory shown in Twilight Princess. In this time frame, after Link completes the Arbiter's Grounds dungeon and reaches the Mirror Chamber, he is told of what happened to Ganondorf following the events of Ocarina of Time. After the Hero of Time informed the royal family of Ganondorf's intentions, he was captured and put on trial, with the outcome determining that he will be executed at the Arbiter's Grounds, a prison isolated far out into the desert, used for the worst criminals the land has seen. However, when the time came, his execution didn't go exactly to plan. Chained to a wall with nowhere to run, Ganondorf was about to meet his punishment for the crimes he committed. The 6 sages summoned their blade to drive through Ganondorf's abdomen, a move that was sure to kill the King of Evil. But in some sort of divine prank as described by the sages, the Triforce of Power within Ganondorf activated its divine ability, giving the Gerudo King strength and overbearing power to not just withstand the blow, but also to break free from his shackles. In a moment of madness, he lunged at the Sage of Water, eliminating one of the 6. Before things could get any more out of hand, not knowing the true strengths of Ganondorf in this moment, the remaining 5 sages acted swiftly. Together, they summoned upon the ability of the Mirror of Twilight, the one gateway between the realms of light and dark. To avoid Ganondorf causing further harm, his execution turned into a banishment. The sages sent the King of Evil to the Twilight Realm, a dark, shadowy plane of existence that exists opposite to the world of light, somewhere that he'd be contained for a time. This brings us to the time frame of Twilight Princess. After completing the first 3 dungeons and securing the few shadow pieces Midna was after, Link draws the Blade of Evil's Bane once again, and heads towards the Gerudo Desert to begin his next quest in collecting the Mirror Shards to repair the Mirror of Twilight. When he first reaches the Gerudo Desert, it's clear just how rough this landscape is. Broken apart by giant canyons cracked into the land, barren ruins spread throughout, and of course, no presence or signs of the Gerudo who controlled these lands not so long ago. The desert in this time frame is cut off from the main kingdom. We're told by the desert expert and member of the Resistance, Aru, that there was once a path that connected the lands together, but it is no more. Aru is described as very knowledgeable on this location, but he doesn't seem to have any knowledge of who once lived here just in the last 100 years. That's a little odd for more than one reason, but we'll come back to that. Something interesting to know is that in the game taking place after Twilight Princess, Four Swords Adventures, we see the return of the Gerudo, now in the Desert of Doubt. So you'd assume they just left for a while after their leader was sentenced to death, right? Well, according to the Hyrule Encyclopedia book, you'd be right. It's stated in there that the Gerudo were driven out of Hyrule during this time, finding their new home in the Desert of Doubt. So, theory busted, right? Well, I think there's more to this answer. For starters, it's heavily debated how canon all of the information in these books is, but that's not why I'm challenging it. I believe that there's signs something else happened here. Something that's been buried so deep that we missed it. A dark truth that was never meant to be uncovered. It's a fair and plausible reason to say that the Gerudo's absence is due to being driven out following Ganondorf's sentencing or execution. He was their leader after all. Regardless of if the Gerudo warriors themselves actually shared his exact views, to the wider kingdom of Hyrule, those views and intentions of their king would be viewed as a wider Gerudo view. What doesn't add up in my opinion is that there's no trace, no mentions, no Gerudo symbols found on the few ruins that remain, and no history seemingly recorded on the tribe's existence outside of Ganondorf. Even looking through all of the text in Twilight Princess, the word Gerudo is never mentioned in the context of the tribe. Another tribe seen in this game, the Oka, are significantly more ancient and also absent within Hyrule itself, apart from Uku, who can be found within the dungeons Link explores. The Oka are considered the closest race to the gods, a group of small bird beings that are surprisingly highly advanced. Settled within the City in the Sky, an ancient settlement that these weird little chicken folk created themselves. Their ruins found in Hyrule are well preserved, and their history documented and researched by Shad. Something important to know about this race is that they hold close connections to the royal family of Hyrule. The Oka are said to have thrived before the arrival of the Hylians, way back in ancient times. They developed incredible creations through their unique magic, such as their home found in the heavens. Another creation was the Dominion Rod, one of the items Link collects during this adventure. The lore behind it is that it was to be carried only by the messenger to the heavens, who would use the magical rod to allow communication between the royal family and Oka when necessary. Of course, it makes sense that they'd be well recorded, but I bring this point up to show that the Gerudo's lack of history, particularly in recent years, is an isolated case. This is especially odd when it comes to Aru. He's extremely knowledgeable on the Gerudo Desert, a land with no access, explaining that the path that once connected Hyrule to the desert is impassable now. We've got to ask, when did that path become inaccessible? Probably not long after Ganondorf's sentencing. The only way Link makes it there is via Fire's cannon. Aru knows of the ancient prison and what it was used for. He knows of the types of criminals that were sent there. But how can he know all of this, but not that there was once a tribe who inhabited the lands? Even if they are gone, it seems like an important part of recent history he'd mention. Well, something rather curious is that in the original Japanese version of Twilight Princess, Aru is confirmed to have once worked for the royal family of Hyrule. He was formerly Zelda's tutor. There's a running theme around the royals here, picking and choosing parts of history to have recorded, something they've dabbled in before. I believe that Aru probably does know of the Gerudo's once presence out here in the desert, but for reasons out of his control, he's been silenced, ordered not to share. I don't believe that the Gerudo were driven out. Rather, I believe that the royal family of Hyrule had them slaughtered. If you take a step back and think about it, that's not that far-fetched of a theory. As I said earlier, following Ganondorf's sentencing after the events of Ocarina of Time, the wider view of the Gerudo as a whole wouldn't have been great. I'm sure the people of Hyrule at the time may have been told that the Gerudo warriors still in the desert were driven out following Ganondorf's sentencing. But that's not the case in my eyes. The royal family of Hyrule have a history of doing unspeakable things that they don't like to share with their people. During the Hyrulean Civil War, prior to the events of Ocarina of Time, we know that they had the Sheikah use the Shadow Temple as a site to interrogate, torture, and murder their enemies. Something that they've tried to keep buried, as it's truly a horrific part of their history, what they did inside here. War or not, the types of devices in here were honestly inhumane. There's bloodstains on the walls and remains scattered in the halls. This is evidence of just how cruel the royal family of Hyrule in that time frame especially could be, all for it to be washed into time and swept under the rug. After Ganondorf was caught out, as the King of Gerudo, I imagine the royal family didn't want to take action on just Ganondorf alone, but his entire band of followers. In Twilight Princess, just a century on, it's remarkably strange that there's no history of the tribe existing. Yet another tribe that dates back to ancient times has a history recorded in detail. It seems to me that the Gerudo met a terrible fate, but it was covered up and taken out of history. Yet another dark, cold, and horrific move from the royal family of Hyrule that we believe to be good people. I believe the orders were sent out to eliminate the Gerudo people of the desert, wiping out the large majority of the female warriors, possibly even taking some to the Arbiter's grounds, as we do find plenty of undead remains that haunt the deep chambers of the prison. I do, however, believe that some would have escaped and survived, avoiding the royal family of Hyrule completely wiping out the Gerudo race, explaining why further down the line we do eventually meet them again during the events of Four Swords Adventures in the Desert of Doubt, their new home after meeting what was an incredibly miserable fate thanks to their own king, Ganondorf. That's my theory on the miserable fate of the Gerudo. However, I have some other things I'd like to bring up for both adding to the theory, but also just interesting details related to it. The first of which is the Twilight invasion led by Zant. When Link meets Princess Zelda for the first time in this adventure, in the shadow-cloaked Hyrule Castle, she tells the wolf form hero of what happened here. Prior to his adventure kicking off, Zant invaded Hyrule, infecting regions of the land in darkness. As a result, terrifying shadow beasts walk through Hyrule's settlements. The residents turn to spirits trapped within. An interesting detail with this is that the invasion on Hyrule Castle itself was much more malicious. As Zant and his shadow beasts stormed the castle, they brutally wiped out the soldiers of Hyrule, forcefully making their way into the throne room. It's not confirmed, but is heavily implied that the rest of the royal family outside of Zelda are absent in this game because they were killed during this attack, leaving only Princess Zelda to surrender the kingdom. In the other regions, there wasn't so much bloodshed and horror to our knowledge, more just sieging the land and leaving its people scared and trapped in Twilight. It's possible that the brutality of the attack on the castle and royals specifically was Zant getting vengeance for Ganondorf. The usurper king of Twilight managed to break out of the Twilight realm with the help of the Gerudo King's powers. Together, they forged a plan to take over the kingdom, which evidently worked. It seems there may have been additional intent at the castle, getting one back on the royal family of Hyrule for how they treated not just Ganondorf, but his people. It's not the most conclusive point of evidence, which is why I decided to bring it up here towards the end of the video, but one I felt was worth mentioning. It's also interesting to note that Zant's cloak has a unique symbol on it that resembles the Gerudo symbol. Nothing concrete here, but a cool little detail. In the same vein, it's also been mentioned that Midna in her true form resembles a Gerudo woman as well. Again, not concrete in any way, but interesting. Back to the Gerudo people themselves. Whilst I do believe their absence was due to yet another dark move from the royals, there may still be Gerudo living within the kingdom during this time frame, or at least descendants of. Telma is the most discussed case of this, the owner of her own bar tucked down into a side street of Castletown. She has red hair and tall build, all of Gerudo genes. Her makeup and accessories are also Gerudo-esque, but that's a little more subjective. It's commonly theorized that Telma might be a descendant of the Gerudo that were seen in Ocarina of Time, managing to live a good life in this time frame. The last point I'd like to add to all of this is that whilst I believe the royal family of Hyrule made these decisions, I don't necessarily think that means that everyone shared the opinion, both when it comes to what they did during the Hyrulean Civil War and also what I'm theorizing that they did to the Gerudo people. I imagine this was likely a decision of the king and queen. If that's their decision, their royal knights will follow those orders. And I don't think Princess Zelda would have had much of a say either, given she was quite young at the time. The royal family of Hyrule across multiple entries to the series are seen to be quite harsh, often making decisions through their eyes only. They don't always have the greatest view on the whole situation. In this case, I don't think they would have known that not all of the Gerudo are evil. This is all a theory and entering speculation, however, so I'll leave it there. Let me know what you think of my theory, folks. Do you agree that the royal family of Hyrule once again committed evil acts and then buried it in the sand? I certainly think so, but I'd love to hear all of your thoughts, critiques, and anything else down below. Thanks a ton for watching, folks. It's been a while since I've made a proper Zelda theory, so I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to subscribe for lots more fabulous Zelda content from myself. And of course, drop a cheeky wee like down below. I'd really appreciate it. I'm always open to video suggestions, so if you have one, feel free to let me know in the comments. As always, a massive thank you goes to my channel backers for helping to make this video all the more possible, with special shoutouts to new members Jade Terry and Joseph Chase. Thank you so much for joining, guys. I really appreciate you. If you'd be interested in supporting my content beyond just watching my videos, which is already highly appreciated, then check out the member info video that can be found by clicking the join button down below. If you'd like to keep up to date with me and what I'm up to, then drop me a follow on my socials, which are linked in the description. A link to my Discord server can also be found there if you want to hop in to chat to myself and many other wonderful Zelda fans. Thanks again for watching, folks. I hope you have a nice rest of your day or night. And until the next time, I've been Hyrule Gamer.